Good morning. I'm Nathan. I'm an HSS, known as High Sensation Seeking. And I'm going to talk to you today about what it's like starting from being a kid all the way through an adult and how to find balance through being a high sensation seeking person. So really what this looks like is it's someone, first off, let's start off with what it is. Someone that for guys, I'd say leans more towards adrenaline junkie and looking for high adventure and dangerous activities that sometimes can be life-threatening. For girls, it could just be more into, and this also applies to guys, more into, and there's a category called new. Doing things that are new is a huge part of being a high HSS, and that for me was more like some finding new hobbies and new things to do. Oh man, I was great at starting things, terrible at finishing them. I could start a project and be so excited about starting it, and then halfway through the project I'm like, I'm not feeling it anymore, and just walk away. And then other things, even relationships. It's easy for an HSS, even if you're an introvert or an extrovert, it can be both people. You have the ability to go and meet new people, even if you want or don't want to. You just have that ability, and it can be a fun activity just to go meet new people. Now, I lean toward the introvert side, and while it may confuse people that know me, they think that I'm actually extroverted. Because they only see me from the side of I'm comfortable around them. So they confuse that with thinking I'm the most extroverted person they know. Truthfully, I don't go out of my way to meet new people. It makes me very uncomfortable. But meeting new people is not a problem because I love people in general. So you'll think of, as a kid, you'll look around at 10 kids and you'll see, well, who's the ones that are interacting with other kids really well and playing really well with other kids, whether it's just a sport or something. Well, that was me, but I wasn't the one. See, an extrovert would be more of the kid that was socially going around and talking and having fun. I could do that at moments if I was comfortable in a sport, but for the most part, in a classroom environment, I was the quietest kid. Okay, so what does that look like? I remember hearing comments from friends growing up all the time, like, oh, you're such a daredevil, you're so dangerous. And this is like little small things, like being on rollerblades when they first came out and launching off the curb and doing like a 360 off the sidewalk onto the road. It may not be a big deal to most people, but to someone that doesn't seek adrenaline and dangerous activities like that, they would just think there was, for an HSS that didn't feel dangerous, it just felt thrilling because, yeah, there were risks, because if you landed sideways or, sideways on your rollerblades, you would just fall flat on your side and get bloodied up again. So HSS people are probably prone to getting injuries quite often because they participate in activities that get them push their limits all the time. And then I even remember in like junior high, like grade school, I'd be getting on a like a 5-foot quarter pipe, dropping sitting on a skateboard with my friend, and we would drop in and have to make a sharp right angle to get to the obstacle course that we created in the workshop. So you would go underneath the garage that was only 1.5 feet tall, and you had to lay flat on your back, and your nose would just scrape through the garage door just to get into the workshop. And then from there you had to go under ladders, dodge things, go around buckets, and then if you hit the rake wrong, the rake would fall and land on you. Yeah, those were the kind of things that I would do and get cheap thrills. And then as an adult, it turns into you hear a group of friends that are going to go hike a nearby mountain, but it's not going to just be hiking. There's going to be rock climbing involved. And you're like, oh yeah, that's totally, yeah, I've never really done it, but yeah, let's go do it. and HSSs just thrive in doing new things. So there'd be moments where I'd be rock climbing areas that I've never done, and I'm kind of relying on the knowledge of others, and didn't think twice about it, and everything worked out okay. No one got hurt, but there would be moments where we're just sitting on the side of the mountain, like scaling, like straight vertical, kind of like you watch that Free Solo movie where the guy's like free climbing without rope. Well, this we had rope, so none of us were going to fall to our deaths, but you did have to keep hanging on to the mountain for long periods of time, for 45 minutes to a couple hours, while we got to the next area where we could actually stop climbing. So we'd be passing up the next backpack that we were wearing up to the person at the top, and they were holding it up there while the next person came up with the rope. It was very complicated, and I remember sitting there on the side of that mountain while we were figuring things out, and one person went up ahead and hooked into the next latch, and I asked the guy next to me, and I said, hey, how long have you been feeling uncomfortable? And he said, oh, I lost it long time ago. I am so done with this. He's just kind of like on the verge of trembling. But for me, as an HSS, I was just kind of in my element. I was like, oh, this is exciting. What's going to happen? Is someone going to slip and they're going to be hanging? And I don't know why my brain was wired to think like, this is great. I'm alive. I feel it. So that's the adrenaline we're talking about. Now, that activity, we were hiking. We get to the top of that, you know, it was a good couple thousand feet climb to get to the peak where it's flat, and we slept overnight, and the people at the top were so scared the whole time when we came up, because they had already come up that same hike in the daylight, and we were doing it with our headlamps, all because I had this HSS moment saying, I am so sick of this, you know, on hikes where you got the switchbacks going back and forth, and you can look down the switchbacks and you can see how they come back and forth a few more times, and you're like, dude, this is such a waste of time. You get bored easily. That's a sign of HSS. That might seem and confuse some to think they are ADD or ADHD. Not the same. So as an HSS, you get bored easily. You want to do new things constantly. So I'm looking at the switchbacks, and I remember from an early age thinking how much I hated switchbacks, because they seem such a non-efficient way of climbing the mountain or going up or down it. I'd rather go straight up, straight down, and take breaks if I had to. And so I'm looking down the switchbacks, and I said, hey, we can save a lot of time by just going straight down. We can see the last one right there. Well, when we got to the last one, we didn't for some reason see it, and we missed it, and now we're not on the trail at all. This is where it gets bad. So we're like on the wrong side of the ravine where the trail wasn't, and we didn't realize that, and so we're kind of bushwhacking it to the mountain straight up ahead. And by the time we get to it, well, before we even get to it, there were moments that you couldn't foresee. Like, you climb straight up this little hill, and then you get to the edge, and oh, it's a 25-foot drop. Well, it's gonna take too long to do rope, and let's just go around. So we go back around, and so by the time we get to the mountain where we needed to scale straight up, it was dark. It had wasted all our time because we had bushwhacked and tried to save time. So that's a moment as an HSS where you have to stop and realize, you know what, there's usually a reason for the trail. And it's way better. I have left the trail a few times thinking it would be better, and it ends up just about every time just stay on the trail. So those are moments where you can fight your HSS and just allow it to be entertained through something else. While you're sitting there being bored, focus your mind on something else that will keep it occupied so you don't feel bored, because boredom as an HSS feels like you're suffocating, like you can't even breathe. It's so awful. So how do you balance these highs and lows, right? You go, let's say you go rock climbing one day, and then the next day you go scuba diving, and then the next day you go skydiving, and then the next day you go and start a new hobby, like how to do, I don't know, ballroom dancing. And then the next day you start and you get a little bit of exposure to all these activities, but you don't become great at any of them. Well, as an HSS, we don't really care. We just want to keep doing things. And it's a trait. First of all, let's establish that it's not a disorder by any means. It's a trait. So there are highs and there are lows, and you want to give your body some downtime and realize that you will be able to try to avoid hitting your peak too often, like too many days in a row. So just pay attention to your body and close attention, especially if you happen to be HSP, highly sensitive people or highly sensitive person, and HSS, high sensation seeking, because they are opposites in traits. So for me, I didn't know I was either. I kind of always sensed and understood that I loved high adventure and doing dangerous things constantly. I'll get to that more in skiing and snowboarding. But I didn't know that I was highly sensitive. That was a huge realization. So high sensation was fun because they're extremes. High sensation's on one end of the spectrum, HSP is on the other. HSP is more cautious and careful and feeling all your sensories, all 5 senses, really intensely. HSS is like, I just want to feel the fun things at full power, and nothing else matters. So you got these extremes, and while they can kind of come together a little bit, like I can feel all my senses and have a great time as an HSS, but I'm also thinking, what's my plan for if this goes wrong or that goes wrong? So I'm constantly deep thinking as an HSP. I'm about to go off this cliff, and I just want to know, how do I do everything correctly so I stay safe? An HSS would, if you were only an HSS, you wouldn't even care how you landed. You would just do it, and maybe do it in a way that would cause a bigger reaction out of others, thinking you're crazy. So, because I'm a mix of both, I was thinking, how can I do it and be safely alive? But I'm gonna do it. And so I get a little mixture of both. I might be like trembling before I jump off the cliff because I'm like so jazzed to do it, but I'm also so scared because I know there's extreme danger and I might get injured. I'd cliff jump into water all the time. We just pushed our boundaries. We'd go up from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20, and then eventually 30, 50. And then one time at Lake Powell, I remember climbing this mountain or sandstone hill with a friend with a screwdriver in our hand, and my friend's dad said, hey, you gotta bring those screwdrivers back if you're gonna take those up that stupid thing. So we're chiseling holes so we could create ourselves finger holes to create the ladder on the side of the sandstone, which is right on the edge of the water, as we're picking our height that we want to get to, which was way up above. Just so you know, when you go up something, way easier to go up than it is to come back down. So as we're climbing this thing, we're not thinking twice about, well, we kind of were. We were vocalizing. So my HSP was saying things like, hey, just so you know, I'm sensing we're going to be able to get up this without a problem. We're probably not going to be able to come back down. And my friends, like, oh wow, that's kind of okay. Well, I'm good. I'm okay with it if you're okay with it. And then we're just kind of like peer pressuring ourselves to our death. And then my HSS said, yes, this is great, new adventure. I've never done this before. Probably never do it again. And as we get to the top of this peak, and I remember thinking I'd gone off some big cliffs as a kid, and they were huge. And then this one, we get to the top, and now we're holding a screwdriver, and we were told that we had to bring him back to the boat. And we're looking over the edge, and oh my gosh, the boat felt like a little tiny miniature micro machine toy that we used to have as kids. I remember thinking, I'm gonna die today. This is a good day to die. And so we're looking at the screwdrivers, trying to decide, do we have the screwdriver facing up, or do we have it facing down? Facing up, let's just say this was my screwdriver, it could stab you in the face. Facing down, it could stab you in the leg. And even up could go right into the body and like into the heart. Like there's so much risk in all this activity. And my HSS is screaming, heck yeah, this is great. We're gonna love it. We're gonna have a good old time. And so we both chose down, having it possibly go through our leg. And as soon as we we were trying to decide who's going to go first, I remember saying, well, if one of us goes first, the other one might chicken out. Shouldn't we both just go at the same time? Because there was plenty of room on this rock. And as we're standing on the edge, it had kind of like a cove effect where we were sitting here right in the middle, and the boat was down below ready to come get us after we jump. And it was so surreal as we both jump and we're holding screwdrivers in our hands and we're falling. I remember letting out my air, I think 2 times before we finally hit. Ah, still falling, holy frick. Ah, I'm still falling. and then one more breath, boom, my feet collided with the water and just crumbled me up. Like I felt like an accordion, just compressed down into a little ball, and bubbles for eternity as I'm swimming with a screwdriver in my hand at half power, swimming, still swimming. I'm gonna die in the bubbles. This is a new experience. And then my HSP saying, this is stupid, get out of here, idiot. So this is where it's funny if you're both, because your HSP is like, I can't believe I did this. This is awesome. The adrenaline was so sick. And then the HSP is saying, you're gonna die, you fool. Just like all the people told you would. Here it is. You're gonna die in bubbles. Enjoy your death. And so I'm coming up. I come out. We get to the top. We're celebrating and congratulating each other. He doesn't have a screwdriver. I still do. So I give him my screwdriver, and I said, look, that was huge, but I cannot live. This is where HSP's kicking in. I cannot live not knowing how big that was. We got to go do it again. And take a rope and measure it. So we had a 75-foot ski rope that we climbed back up that stupid thing and did it again. And our Tevas at the time were these sandals with just the latches, one latch in the front, one around the ankle. They broke. My toes on the second jump, right here between the toes, split open with the impact of hitting the water so hard. It's supposed to point your toes, it's supposed to stay straight, hit perfectly. Anyway, when we measured that thing, it was 72 feet, because when we got to the end of the rope, there was only 3 feet of rope at the top when it finally hit the bottom. And then the fear really kicked in. Like the HSP part of me was like starting to take control, saying, now you've done it. Now you know you are on something too big. You shouldn't be jumping off 70-foot cliffs, right? And now we had to jump again. So we dropped the rope, let them have the rope, and at least we didn't have screwdrivers on our second jump. And everything was fine again. We both jumped at the same time again, because quite honestly, it was so terrifying. I just kind of wanted off the mountain after that point and really didn't want to do that big of a cliff again. But so an HSS can get high adrenaline without taking life-threatening situations. Plenty of people in those same type of cliffs die. And there's a reason for that. One slight angle off, your spinal cord gets snapped, everything goes wrong. It was a lot of compression at that impact and the speed you hit that water. You don't have to do that to be able to have a good time. And there's people, you're gonna watch them on YouTube, doing those sweet aerials, gainers, flips, all directions, 2 or 3 flips off of cliffs, and they land it and they never get hurt, and you're like, oh, they can do it, I can do it. Not always the case. They could also land incorrectly at some point in their life and die. Or worse, be paralyzed. For an HSP, that's probably worse. Being alive but not able to do all the fun activities. So pick your poison and be careful. That's a really strong tip. You got to also learn what boundaries are you feeling more safe at that you aren't gonna end up 6 feet under. So what else? Adrenaline stuff for me as a skier was a good comparison between the two. When I went skiing as a kid, I grew up skiing on the side of when I could start to see the snow as we were getting closer to the mountain. I would start in my mind from an early age I started skiing when I was like 3, and I switched over to snowboarding at about 15. And I remember as an early age, in my mind, I would always be like hitting the banks with my skis, going up and down, up and down. That's HSP, deep thinking, looking for all the ways to do things better, you know, always analyzing. And sometimes that, for an introverted HSP, that can be someone that internalizes things and hardly ever talks, but when they do, it's after putting a lot of thought into it. And an extrovert HSP could be someone that thinks deeply, but they also do things more spontaneously and just kind of go with the flow. So an HSP extrovert can probably be a little bit confusing to also look like an HSS, since they are more spontaneous and want to be social with people all the time. All right, so I would also snowboarding, and when I got to I remember thinking in my mind how snowboarding I was told it was going to be really hard to learn, and you're going to get the injuries or the risks are your wrist getting broken, falling back, landing on your tailbone, and being bruised and in a lot of pain. So in my mind, I was like, HSP was like, oh, I am so not looking forward to physical pain. We don't like physical pain. And yet, my HSS was excited to try the new adventure, like really excited. But my HSP was kicking in stronger, saying, I don't want to get hurt. Why are you doing this? And so I was putting a lot of effort into practicing in my mind. And there is so many studies about professional athletes practicing their activity, their sport, before they do the activity, and being better than they were before they actually did the activity. So here I was practicing on the side of the banks on the way to going up to the mountain. And I remember hearing people say how long it takes to learn, and I kind of remember it being really easy for me to learn it. As soon as I got on that board and I started slipping sideways, there was no fear anymore. It was like, oh, I'd already done this in my mind. Yeah, you got to lean back on one edge. Oh, I screwed up, hit the edge, boom, hit my knees. I'm like, oh, that's what they meant by hit the edge. gotta be balanced just right. Always keep one edge up just a little bit. And so once I hit a few edges on that first day, first half a day, I started to really understand it. And eventually got to a place where, you know, within a day or so, first 2 days, I was really enjoying it and starting to look for the jumps on the side. HSS is now saying, okay, you're safe. Go have some fun. And so I'd go and find the jump, boom, jump off the jump, catch a foot of air, and then slip right to my butt and go, geez, what the heck? Now my HSP's kicking in saying, why the heck did I fall so hard? I was only a foot off the ground. I want to go 20 feet off the ground. Anyway, so there's this like big battlefield of emotions that you go through. Now the HSP, if you are both like myself, is going to get drained from these high adventure activities. So drained. Next morning, you're gonna feel like a complete piece of crap and wanting to do nothing with somebody. Now, you might be able to do this for a couple days in a row if you're on a family activity and you really have no choice in the matter. But just be aware that you have to be aware that you can get through it and you can calmly take those emotions down. I do a lot of breathing as an adult. It was easier at moments for me as a kid to get through hard situations that my HSP was completely drained and I'm off and I'm cranky and I'm ready to blow up the world with my emotions. Well, HSS for me as a kid was a lot more stable, and I was able to rely on that strength over my HSP that just wanted to be upset at everything if I was exhausted. So know this, sleep is number one. As an HSP, you have to rest, like especially if you're HSS. And I mean, consistent rest is really, really key. I used to do a stupid paper route, like of all jobs, it's like $2 an hour, right? It's like Napoleon Dynamite said. And I would get up at 4 something in the morning to go do a paper route before going to band in high school. It was so ridiculous. Not a good activity for me. And yet and yet here I was thinking I was having a good time. HSS was having a good time doing new things, paper route, then band, then school. And by the time I got to school, everybody else was like just waking up, and I'm like, dude, I've already been having a killer time doing all these different activities, and yeah, third hour, I'm dead asleep because I went to sleep at probably midnight. So you can't function on very little sleep. You will crash, and if you don't crash, you'll wish you did, because you're going to be so miserable feeling. It will be as if your world is closing in, and nothing, there's no happy days anymore. Christmas is not real. So you're going to feel dark, very dark. And as an adult, that translates into anxiety and depression and intense feelings of I'm not worth anything. And that's not true. So the sleep is number one. You have to get rest, like lots of it. For me, it can be anywhere around 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep. Depending on the kind of stress and pressures you have going on you at that time in your life, will probably determine how much sleep you end up needing. So number 2 is eating. Sleep and eating are so important. You have to eat well, like often. You can't go 8-hour periods without it having a huge whiplash effect. Your body will be like just trembling for energy, and you've already expended it all, and you're going after the next activity because as an HSS, you're like, dude, I'm feeling kind of weird right now. This is kind of weird. Like maybe I'm okay. And then your HSP is just like, I'm so pissed off you haven't taken care of me. Why am I so mad at everything? So you have these two voices in your head screaming for control. So there was a moment when I was snowboarding as a teenager where I'm making decisions on my own. Now I'm not being influenced by my friends or my brothers. I'm with a friend at the time, but I'm kind of taking the lead on whether I was going to go off certain cliffs and how big they were. And my HSP is kicking full end, saying, hey, look, you could end up going off a cliff, hitting a tree stump that you couldn't see and being dead, or breaking your board and having to do the walk of shame all the way back down to the lift, and it ruins the rest of your day. And it was expensive to get there in the first place, so that wasn't a fun realization. So there's that side of it, and then there's the other moments where so an HSP, I let my HSP drive on the first run through an area I haven't been, even though my HSS is like on cloud 9, because it's already happy being in a new environment. And yes, it would be even more thrilled to just hit that new area without looking at it safely and just fly through and explore. You can do that in certain moments if you know you're completely safe, if you're both. And then on my second run through, and I've created my second track, and I'm going through areas like on Brighton Ski Resort. There's this place called the Rock Garden, and you got all these cool little rock pop outs that you can go and hit and drop, go another 20 feet, hit and drop, do another aerial, a flip or 360, go to the next one, hit and drop, and you're dropping these 8 to 10 foot drops. It's pretty cool. And then there was a moment over at where was it? Shortly after I got married as an adult, my wife and I were in an out-of-bound area, and that's the fun thing about HSS. You see these avalanche signs on the ski runs, and it's like, warning, big bold letters, danger, enter at your own risk, avalanche territory. And I'm like, HSP's like, heck yeah, baby, this is gonna be great. Fresh powder over there, because no one else is gonna go over there. HSP, as soon as I get to the top of it, says, what a waste. I put all this energy into getting up here, and there's 1,000 runs. Everybody is over here that are HSS, basically. Anyway, it was kind of fun, because there was some moments, even though I couldn't find a pure perfect track that had nobody on it, and I was going off a lip, a hangover that drops like 10 to 15 feet, and it's steep enough that even though you didn't have much speed on this flat start, you could get just enough and then push off, and you could carry on about 20 to 30 feet. And I remember doing this activity with my wife and how thrilling it was, because we were newlyweds, we were having fun, we were in college, and here we were on a bowl that she just didn't feel comfortable, right? It took a lot of convincing her that being in the trees and out of bounds is not, this is the HSP talking right now, is not dangerous. When you look around, there's a lot of people doing the same activity, and when you go through the trees, you don't have to go through it at full speed. You can actually go really slow, and it's really, really peaceful. So there's ways to balance your activities if you're with certain people that you want to make sure you and them have a good time. There's my HSP kicking in and making sure others are having fun and not feeling threatened. So yeah, so I go off this cliff and lip, and I launch, and the first time I went off it was just like, you know, maybe a 10-foot, 15-foot drop, and I stuck it. Wait. No, I almost stuck it. I landed backwards, and I just kind of like sunk in a hole, and I was like, oh, it's nice and soft. Yes, my HSP was like, thank heavens I didn't die, because this is a perfect environment. I want to do it one more time and go bigger. And so the second time I come up on this edge, I get as much speed as that little run could give me, and I launch off of it, and I went probably 3 times further, and it was so thrilling. And I stuck it, and I rode, and I flew, and I kept going, and then I came past my wife at the time, still my wife, by the way, 20 plus years, very happily married. HSS, by the way, struggle to have lasting relationships because we seek after new things so often that you can get bored in a relationship in 2 seconds. Well, I can tell you right now, being that I've been married since 2001, there is plenty of new things you can focus your HSS on that will keep it satisfied, that you do not need new relationships. So that is possible. If you're thinking it's not, that's not true. So I fly off this, and I had a huge, you know, it was like one of the most thrilling, like if a scale is 10 on 10 being the highest, and you're looking for adventure, I hit an 11 at that moment when I launched off it, because my HSP is screaming, "You're going too fast, fool!" And then I launch off, and my HSP says, "Screw that, woo!" And I leaned forward just right this time, and I'm totally in with the mountain, leaning angled down, straight down, and stick it, boom, powder shoots everywhere, it covers me, I'm going through, and I come out of it, and I'm still up, cruising through. Oh, it was rad, so rad. So it hit an 11. You can't hit 11s every day of your life, so that's something you have to have perspective as an HSS. Look for those moments, let it happen, but don't be disappointed if you can't keep hitting that grand slam moment. That's a perfect alignment of things happening. I didn't control that the weather created perfect powder a week or so beforehand, and I didn't even time it on purpose to go there right afterwards, you know. So it's just, you can't always control everything to make it happen. I could go back to that same run the very next week, and it would be chopped up on that very exact same spot by too many people hitting that same spot, and it would have been crunch right onto icy, hard surfaces. So you gotta realize that you can only have perfect moments a few times in your life, and just be okay with that. You'll still find plenty of satisfaction at like a 7 or an 8 of adrenaline, and these are really non-dangerous activities. Like I will do, oh my gosh, you're gonna be really disappointed to hear this, but I started gardening about 4 or 5 years ago, and believe it or not, my HSS may not be anywhere near a 10, but it's still new to me. So I'm creating a garden and creating ways to shade my house that is in 120 degrees temperature, and it's using both skills, HSP and HSS. So I'm deep thinking on how am I going to problem solve this, and my HSS is like, well, this is definitely different. It's really hard. It's a new adventure, right? So it was probably, at first it was maybe a 5, and then it grew to maybe a 6 or 7. At moments in my gardening, when I get to see other people's reactions to what I've accomplished after 4+ years of doing it, it's like an 8, and sometimes it even feels like a 9. So you can get high adrenaline satisfaction out of just doing new things you've never done, and they don't have to be dangerous at all. Like, not even close. There's nothing dangerous in a garden. I don't even use shears to cut anything. All my gardening is like it's all in like really soft soil that I create, and I've got worms coming out of everything. And anyway, the point is, there's a million hobbies you can pick up on and never get bored and be perfectly safe. So that's my takeaway for you as an HSS, is find something you think is interesting and go after it for a while and enjoy it. And even if you get bored of it and go do something else, you might still find satisfaction in coming back to it someday in the future. So go easy on yourself. You have so much energy and so much enthusiasm for life. There's nothing more thrilling than to run into a few more HSSs at the same moment and do some of these adventures together. Just do them with a little bit of caution so you can live to the next day. Hold on. All right. So that's my takeaway. I hope some of those stories helped you see how the two traits come together. But mostly, if you're just HSS, just know that you're able to do lots of things and still have a good time, and you're able to hold long relationships and still find value. And there's way more to talk about, and I'll do separate videos when I'm talking about relationships with my wife, so that you can hear her side of it as well, because there's so much to unpack when it comes to a marriage and a long-lasting relationship, and how my HSP affects her. Like, our conflict resolution, holy, it is so different from each other. I, as an HSP, have to have a ton of downtime and space from that heated conversation before I can actually tackle it with a clear head. She can say, I'm sorry, and this is two different upbringings. Her upbringing was, she saw her parents say sorry right away. Mine, I didn't see them say sorry ever. Now, they may have done it in their privacy between each other after a fight, but I never saw it as a kid. So that affected my brain, and enough that whenever we had our heated fights, I needed days. I wasn't modeled how to even say sorry and how to apologize. They taught us kids how to apologize to each other. And yeah, I remember doing that as a kid to each other, but it wasn't the same as if you witness an adult do it to another adult, or an adult do it to a kid. So it was hard for me, and it took me literally up to 5 days to apologize from a fight that we were having, and have myself clear-headed and not be like just rage going on when I'm ready to go after the hard conversation. So you need time sometimes, if you are anything like me, and you need time to decompress and relax before going back into a conversation that needs to have some kind of compromise. Usually in almost every fight, there's a little give and take. Not just one person is completely right and the other person is completely wrong. There's usually some kind of concession where you can go back and forth between the two. We'll get way more into that in another video. But hopefully that gives you a feel for what it's like to be HSP and HSS, but mostly HSS. And then just know that you can be one or the other, and you can be both. And thank heavens on both. Peace out, guys. Have a good day.